In a lot of ways, you are the conduit that is bringing this ship together. So you're sort of the owner of that. What does success look like to each of these folks? And can you rally them together? From an Indian context perspective, with all the advancements that are happening in AI, 96% of the skills that are required to do a job of a software engineer can now be done with AI. You would think drone pilot would not be a job that you would think about. This was
description called drone pilot.
Yes.
This is fabulous.
Yes. What is changing is really the technology that is coming in and the application of the technology. What is not changing is human skills. I would encourage folks to take up those stretch assignments and really sort of look at what outside of my day-to-day would be some of the opportunities for me to practice some of those human skills. I go to college, I get a degree, I start working, and that's the skill that I'm going to use for a very long period of time. With AI, the shelf life of skills is going down. There is big money that is going to be spent here. That can potentially now happen today because, of course, we have that spending capacity. For a fresher, really expose yourself to as many different organizations that you can from an outsider perspective and start taking on, if at all there are any projects.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Feature. We have an absolute product marketing guru with us in the room today. Ikroop is actually leading the charge in creating an equitable talent marketplace for India's workforce as a part of the largest professional networking platform, which is LinkedIn. She has over 13 years of experience in business development, go-to-market, motions, and narratives to the table. As a part of product marketing, if you are a product marketer or are looking to transition into product marketing from other areas like product business development or sales, this episode is just for you. What are we going to cover today? We're first going to actually talk about Ikroop's rich career journey and how she has transitioned into a product marketer. Next, we actually dive into the world of PMM at LinkedIn. We're going to talk about how she builds feature narratives and design go-to-market strategies. As well as finally, we're going to discuss how do you stay ahead of trends in light of the new AI advancement that's happening. So get ready for some very interesting insights. I'm super excited to have her today on the show, and this is going to be an exciting episode. Welcome to Behind the Feature, Ikroop.
Hey, Deeksha.
Share a bit about yourself and a bit about what you're doing at LinkedIn.
Sure, we can start with what do we do here at LinkedIn in product marketing. So as you would imagine, leading one of the largest sort of platforms for professional networking, there is a big B2B business that sits behind this, right? Which is for organizations to look at scouting good talent and of course making sure that, they're keeping that talent engaged, learning and so on. So that for us would make the talent business, and I head product marketing for India and as an extension some parts of APAC as well. What does this mean? This really means how do we really talk to businesses in India about how LinkedIn can be a great partner for them when they're looking at fulfilling their talent requirements, and of course how does technology really play a role. So within product marketing, we would look at bridging that gap between what is it that we're building out globally and also how relevant is that to local needs of users and companies within the Indian context.
That sounds fantastic. A product marketing manager means different things in different organizations. It kind of gets confusing. It's just a new kind of a profile that's come out in the tech world. It wasn't there a couple of years back. Can you share a bit more into what does a product marketing manager role actually entail?
It could mean a lot of different things depending on the context that is there and the business that you're really sort of serving, right?
Okay.
So from general, if you look at it, you would have different teams that sit in the ecosystem, right? You would have the product team that is really building out features and functionalities that we think users would need. You would have sales teams that are there. You would have customer success. You would have all of these different sort of teams that come together to servicing particular needs. Now, what brings all of this together is a function called product marketing, which is, can we be that conduit between all of these different teams and really sort of orient them towards customer centricity, and then of course craft out those go-to-market motions that would come together, and of course that would be backed by narratives.
Can you explain what is motions?
So go-to-market motions would typically be what is it that you need to do to make sure you get in front of your users and customers, right?
Okay.
So when you look at different contexts, depending on who your ultimate user is, the way that you would go ahead and get yourself known would be different, right?
Would this be like a pitch deck? Is that what to me?
So a pitch deck would actually be one of the ways that you would do that, right? So if I were to classify that, so think about it as, let's say, either a top-down or a bottoms-up. Now, again, words that we're very familiar with. If you were to look at bottoms-up, for example, which is what is very, very common in the SaaS world or in the tech world, which is, can we get users really to start trying out the product? Most organizations would kind of go it free and then sort of build in features and functionalities that help monetize, right? So that would be at a user level, much like, let's say, Google would do it, or let's say an Uber would do it for individual rides. Think of any B2C platform that you engage with. What is it really trying to do? It's trying to get you to use their product at a user level. If you see value, you of course pay more.
Can you give me an example in your day-to-day context to better understand this in terms of different stakeholders?
Absolutely. So now think about it in the talent context. Now, when you're looking to hire, who's the user in this case? Just putting it back to you.
So then it's the HR professional.
Correct. So within the HR world, it would be a recruiter, right? Who's the one who's really sort of looking at what sort of open requirements you have that need to be fulfilled.
Correct.
That would be a recruiter, right? Recruiter would be the person who would interface with your product on a daily basis. Now, you would really want those guys to be comfortable. You would want them to, in most cases, advocates for what you have to offer and see value. So that's where you would really sort of nurture that user pool of recruiters. So much like, let's say, any other platform that you would see, or even a Facebook, for example, what are you really doing? You're getting individuals to get used to the product and start seeing value and seeing adoption, right? So that would be your recruiters. Now, ultimately, what does that roll up to? That would roll up to a talent acquisition head, which is now looking at what is my cost of running this entire operations.
So it was hiring somebody.
Correct. Or hiring people on a yearly basis, and of course, running my recruitment team, right? Now, what would be interesting for those guys? What would be interesting for those guys would be stuff around insights, around talent movement. What are skills that are currently in place within the organization, outside? What are some of the business requirements? Now, that's where you would have a very good combination between product coming in with marketing, and of course, you would have a sales team as well, right? If you just take it a notch up, who would that sort of roll up to? That would roll up to the CHRO. Now, that would really be the C level that is looking at what's my cost of talent, and if in effect what's my cost of running this business. So the conversation that you would have there would not just be around recruitment, it would be around talent management. So given where you play in this entire ecosystem, your way of engaging with that audience would be different, and your way of really sort of showcasing value would be different, which is, as a concept, go-to-market motions.
Okay. And you also mentioned narratives. What do you mean by narratives in your context?
So when you're looking at narratives, in effect, what are you really trying to meet? You're saying this is what we see as gaps in the market in terms of user requirement versus what is being serviced. Plus, on the flip side for us as an organization, what is it that we can credibly promise, right? So when you kind of bridge these things together is what you generally in the jargon world called a narrative, right? Which is, what is my story to tell to you? Why should you care about me and what I have to offer? So that would be narratives, and you could imagine for each of the segments that we spoke about as an audience, that could be different. So for example, at a recruiter level, it would really be, can you help me be efficient, right? Can you help me be efficient in my day-to-day? Can you cut down my admin time for a lot of the things that I have to do to ultimately be good at my job, right? At a talent acquisition head level, it would again, like we spoke about, be, hey, can you help me run this in a cost-effective manner, right? Can you reduce my cost of operations? And ultimately at a CHRO level, it would really be, can you make me have talent as a competitive advantage in my space? So for all of these three different audiences, it would be a different pitch or a different narrative that you would go after. Ultimately, of course, all of them need to speak to each other, because you would want that, everyone at different levels has a very common and consistent view of how do you create value for them. So that in effect would be something that we would classify as a narrative.
So tell me something, when you're looking at a PMM, what are some of the skill sets you think a person should have?
So you would imagine, and like you rightly pointed out, the role in itself has gone through so many transitions, right? And it's been an evolving journey. And of course, much like yourself and I, we're also in the middle of that, right? And it's going to continue to evolve. So currently, what you would think as critical skills would be how do you tell a good story? So storytelling would be the first skill that you would look at. And of course, given the context that we are in B2B, it would really be, can you tell a story with data, right? Because most of these decisions are being made on the basis of data within organizations. So can you really craft that story that can be compelling, but of course backed by data? So that would be like the first thing, which is an individual that's really comfortable with data and then can craft stories around it. The second piece, as you would imagine, given that there are so many different teams that you need to interface with, it's a highly cross-functional role. So your ability to manage stakeholders, right? And also understand what would success look like to these different stakeholders. Because in a lot of ways, you are the conduit that is bringing this ship together, right? So you're sort of the owner of that. What does success look like to each of these folks? And can you rally them together, right? That would be the second piece that we would really sort of double down on and make sure we've got right, because someone who's a team player would go a long way in this role. And the last one would be, again, agility. As we've spoken about it, there are different things that are happening. I mean, we're in such an exciting space within India right now, especially with B2B as well. We really need folks who can be open to change on a very ongoing basis, and then be folks that can actually rally the team together. So agility would be something that we would really sort of value when we're looking at PMM.
So if I have to summarize this, the first one is be a great storyteller,
right,
backed with data. The second one is stakeholder management, extremely important. And then the third one is agility, because I personally know none of my days look same, and
correct,
every day is different, and I'm thrown a different curveball every day. You think we've missed anything?
One more that I would love to add here would be customer centricity. As you would look at, again, it being one of those roles where there is, like you mentioned, no day looks the same.
Yeah.
What is that one common anchor point
right.
that should matter? It's customer centricity. So, from again a PMM lens, can you really, really know what the ultimate user pain points and challenges are, and then make sure that every action that we take is really trying to solve for that, right? So we would be navigating a lot of things on consistent basis, but then what sort of our North Star? Our North Star would be customer centricity, and someone that can really articulate that, and of course make sure that all the different stakeholders are aligned to that piece would again be a great skill to have in a PMM role.
So, Ikroop, I want to also talk about how is it that you go around designing launches at LinkedIn? Maybe I'll pick some notes for my own launch.
Absolutely. So from a launch perspective, again, as we spoke about go-to-market motions previously, right? It really depends on who are we trying to get to and what's the business context. So again, very, candidly, this being a global company, majority of our launches would be global in nature, right? Because we are looking at consistency of experience and of course, consistency of features. But what sort of started to come up off late is, of course, our sort of attention to detail when it comes to local market nuances. And what are some of the things that we see are, again, very sort of urgent requirements from markets? Why I say this is, I'm sure, much like everyone else, you would have also seen a lot of AI that has been spoken around. And of course, it's the buzzword right now. We, of course, have launched a lot of AI features and functionalities within our products, both on the hiring side and the learning side, right? Now, while that would be consistent, the way that we talk about those in India will definitely be different from how we're positioning them globally, right? To give you an example, one of the things that we've launched recently on our learning product is something called the AI coach. Now, from an AI coach perspective, just to give you a little bit of a glimpse, it's really about how can I curate learning for you. So every individual might have different career aspirations, different things that they want to pick up in terms of skills, and where they see that would sort of enable them to make their next move, right? Globally, this would be an individual's prerogative, right? So learning is something that individuals take ownership of. And I'm sure much like the audience, you and I, we can attest that that may or may not be true for culturally here for us in India, right? And that one particular insight really sort of changes our launch strategy for India versus globally, right? Why I say that is, my pitch to a business would be very different to what I would think a user might care about. And from an organization perspective, a learning coach would really be how can businesses take that leap with their employees and take them on that learning journey, which ultimately would, of course, benefit the business in the longer run, right? So from a launch perspective, our go-to-market in India, for example, the learning coach, would be something that would be top-down versus how we might do it globally, which is bottoms up. So when you say top down, you mean as you go to the CHRO or CEO of the company? Yes.
versus if this was in America or one of the Western countries, you'd actually go directly to the user. A lot of people don't know that or appreciate that about LinkedIn. I think we all use LinkedIn every day for like finding jobs or just reading up. There is this entire B2B world which you are looking after in India.
Yes.
In this sense, what are some of the challenges that you face beyond the localization aspect?
One of the things that you would think about, and as you're pointing out, would actually be persona building. What I mean by that, now, like you rightly said, you of course are a user of LinkedIn, but you also potentially can be a B2B buyer, right?
Yeah.
So depending on what you're doing, you could be different things to the business as a whole. And my ability to recognize that and map that to you is something that would be key in me unlocking a larger wallet share, right? So you as an individual, again, could be, let's say, a premium customer, which of course a lot of folks are, right? Like LinkedIn Premium is something a lot of us have. But then in your day job, maybe you are the head of L&D, which makes you a buyer for the organization on an L&D perspective. So my ability to speak to you as a persona as a whole is one of the bigger challenges that you will find, because of course the level of complexity in that, how does all of these different pieces interact?
I also want to understand, because we both kind of operate in very similar. We work in a global context, but then we are working when I launched for India. What are some of the differences that you have seen in terms of the global versus local context in your day?
Now, you would imagine, again, with the business being pretty similar, right? That, of course, our users are the same. We want to sell would be similar globally. What's interesting is, as a PMM, you definitely have to look at what's the so what or the why behind the data. All right. What I mean by that is, what are the two things that, let's say, talent acquisition or, businesses care about when it comes to talent? It would really be around how fast can I fill the existing roles that I have open?
Yes.
And of course, what kind of, let's say, people are quality of talent that is coming in. Two things that would stay very consistent across the globe, right? You would imagine. But let's kind of go a little deeper on what does the data tell us, right? Now, from an Indian context perspective, the number of days that it takes to fill a role in India is 44, which is the shortest amount of time globally.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Now, what I mean by that is, when you take it in the larger context of demand and supply, what does it really tell us? That the supply of talent is way more. Right?
So thousands applicants for every role.
Exactly. So now you would imagine the challenge when it comes to businesses that are really trying to hire is, if I'm getting like 1,000 applicants for every job that I put out, how do I make sure that I have the right tools and technology to sift through those, to really sort of come out with what are some of the people that I really want to speak to and that are relevant to the job and have some sort of skill sets or, some sort of credentials to show that they are a good candidate for me to speak with. Now, this Indian context versus global looks very different, right? So what we might look at building for India, for example, from a features and functionality perspective, would really be solving for that challenge, which is, we've got a really short window to fill out roles, right? And we've got like all of these people that are coming in. How do we make the recruiter way more efficient and his day-to-day way more easier to get to that right talent, which of course brings us to the second piece, which is quality of talent. Right? Now, quality talent, again, would not just be external. It could also be internal. How I can look at managing my existing workforce to really sort of give them opportunities inside the organization rather than always scouting for talent outside. Right? Now, that in the context of, let's say, upskilling would really be, how do I give you a very good view of the skills that are in the organization, and for you to then map out what are my needs in the future, right? Which again, in an Indian context, could be very different to how it looks like globally. Because here, we really sort of rely on credentials, right? We really want people to go ahead and upscale and of course have that credential backing them to be like, do you have that skill set and what's your proficiency level, right? Because a lot of those things are stuff that organizations really care about. And that is something that we need to build into how we address this need in India versus globally.
with AI, that's advancement that's happening. How do you see it evolving the talent acquisition piece? I've heard you talk about this before, so I'd love for our viewers to actually.
Absolutely. I think the way that we should think about AI, really just take a step back and be every time there is an advancement in technology, it really calls for reevaluation of what does it mean to work and what does it mean for the economy. To just give you like some stats which were very shocking to me when I first read it, with all the advancements that are happening in AI, 96% of the skills that are required to do a job of a software engineer can now be done with AI. So, for us Indians, it's definitely
it's quite scary.
It's definitely something that we need to look at because it's not something that, we talk about often. So what does that really mean? Human time that was now previously spent on coding would today actually be spent on collaboration. So for a software engineer, previously this would not even feature as one of the top skills.
Correct.
Which today, your ability to work with other people and collaborate and communicate actually has become the number one skill versus your ability to code, because AI can do a lot of that. And the second part is really also around upcoming jobs that didn't exist previously, right? You and I, of course, can speak to morphing of jobs, but really sort of creation of new jobs. So for example, if you just look at what are some of the jobs that have really come up in India just last year, you would think drone pilot would not be a job that you would think about.
There's
This was
description called drone pilot.
Yes.
This is fabulous.
Yes. So there is now a job that is popping up in places like Bangalore and Chennai, which is specifically around looking for skills for people who can be drone pilots. So when you're thinking about AI, you're really sort of, taking a step back to be what is changing, right? And what is staying consistent. What is changing is really the technology that is coming in and the application of the technology. What is not changing is human skills. So our ability to reinvent ourselves or pick up new things, or how agile we might be, or how we collaborate and communicate, how, empathetic can we be towards each other. Now, those skills actually are going to be a premium going forward with AI, which of course is a piece that a lot of us are not very, exposed to currently.
Correct.
But that's kind of the trend line that we see.
So for someone who kind of struggles with this kind of skills, what would your tips be kind of hone and improve?
The first piece you would imagine would be recognition, right? Recognizing that there is that shift that's happening. Once you do that, is really sort of becoming comfortable with the discomfort of it, right? And in the next, just to sort of put it out there in practice, I would encourage folks to take up those stretch assignments and really sort of look at what outside of my day-to-day would be some of the opportunities for me to practice some of those human skills. So can I be part of stretch projects that might be happening across the world? Can I actually go ahead and start talking to people around the organization that might be doing different things, right? Be it around my areas of interest, which can be around technology, but at the same time, folks that might be touching customers in different segments, right? Or folks that are leveraging technology in a different application from what my current job requires me to do, would be that starting point for you to at least start exposing yourself to different ways of interacting, right?
Okay. It's not necessarily easy, right? Sometimes, but finding the stretch project or getting the time to do it. Are you a proponent of someone saying, hey, go do this course? Or do you believe in putting yourself in more awkward, difficult situations and then try?
I would say it's actually a combination. And what we're seeing today is that, within, of course, an organization context, managers are playing an increasingly important role of creating those setups and scenarios, right? On a very small team level, can we create those safe spaces where people can openly talk about what skills that they want to develop, right? Or what are some of the areas that they'd like to explore more? So there could be places where there might be similar interests on the team, or even with the manager taking some accountability. You can also look at a more organization level. And, that's what I feel like going forward, learning and development as a functional would be really, really key to organization success, because it's no longer to what you're saying, hey, go do that course. It is really creating those programs where people feel open towards putting the hand up to either saying, I want to learn this, what's the best way? Or really sort of bringing people together in different formats, which encourages innovation of thought, right? So from a learning and development perspective, it's really the role of being an educator and enabler that will be the key going forward, because in the space of AI, it's no longer going to be know-it-all, because that's kind of what we lived with before, right? And a lot of us still do in India, which is I go to college, I get a degree, I start working, and that's the skill that I'm going to use for a very long period of time. With AI, the shelf life of skills is going down. So now if the shelf life is going down, then I need to have that mindset, or I need to cultivate that mindset of I will constantly be in a space of learning in every few terms in my career. Now, with that being said, it would move from knowing it all to potentially learning a lot of it. So learning and development as a function would really play a big role in that.
And for someone who's a product marketing manager, how do you see AI coming into play? Because the role already has a lot of aspects of human interaction.
Yes.
Do you see AI actually impacting a product marketing manager?
You would imagine, from a PMM perspective, it would really be around how good and detailed your customer insights can get, right? So
leveraging AI.
Correct.
Okay.
So there would be two parts to this, right? From a PMM perspective, you're really trying to map out the product that you have. Two, of course, needs in the market. And the third dynamic to this is what is the landscape look like, right? From an AI perspective, it would enable folks just like myself to get on top of a lot of those customer insights without spending that amount of time really sort of, none of us love reading on a very consistent basis as much as we should do it. AI can really shorten that time period, or rather shorten that whole cycle for you to be on top of what current trends are there, what is competitive landscape looks like, what potential looks like. So for you to be able to get customer insights in a much more organized fashion, definitely an AI play. I would say creatively, it could again be a play that comes up in terms of just sort of, shortening that time for you to get to a creative outcome would definitely be an area. So bottom line, we see that AI would bring in a lot of efficiency, even from a product marketing role. Trust me, the core things that we do will not change. They would actually be more premium now.
What would your advice be for some of the upcoming PMMs to stay ahead of the curve?
PMM is one of those roles where having a domain expertise would go a long way. Now, that could be for people that are trying to break into the field as a fresher. I know, of course, the journey would look different, but really kind of seeing what is your interest level, be it in financial services, or be it in e-commerce, or in, for example, the HR space, or anything else that you're seeing come up. Can you really sort of spend some time building your domain knowledge of what are the challenges? What are some of the things that can be solved for? That's again the number one thing that would differentiate you as a PMM from the next PMM that is out there, right? Your ability to have a point of view. The second would really be around, there are a lot of interesting creative launches that are happening. Can you be somebody that actually goes ahead and studies those, right? Both on the B2B and B2C side. Because one of the things that I want to call out is, from again a product marketing space, from an India market potential perspective, from what I was reading last, currently, B2B spending is going to be to the tune of about $12 billion, which accounts for about 5% of the global spend. It is estimated to double in the next 5 years. So what I mean by that is there is big money that is going to be spent here, right? And there are a lot of ways that these buyers haven't been spoken to in the past that can potentially now happen today because, of course, we have that spending capacity. Why that is important is what is it that you bring to the table in terms of engaging with that audience that might be differentiated. So you as a PMM really need to look at that and draw inferences and, of course, inspiration from different places. The third thing I would really say is the power of community. Given that, again, it's a new space, it's an upcoming space that is evolving, you would see that one PMM to the other, the world looks really different.
Yes.
Right? So how can you increase your sphere of influence? And of course, education within the community would really set you apart because you would have a more rounded view of what's happening out there, right? And the last one, again, we're all victims of the podcast world. So I would say there are a ton of great podcasts that are out there, a lot of them global in nature. So don't limit yourself. Product Marketing Alliance is one great place where you can find a lot of resources. If you are someone from the HR space, then Josh Burston would be a person to look out for, again, to get an understanding of what's happening in the domain, what are some of the new and creative product launches that are happening, what is competition doing. So really having that point of view would be something that would go a long way in you being one of those sought after product marketers.
This is fantastic. What, according to you, is one of the biggest difference for someone who's working as a product marketer in the B2B world versus B2C world? How does the skill set have to be different?
I would say, again, it would talk to the piece that we were mentioning earlier around the go-to-market motion, right? So B2C, again, you're trying to get attention of folks that possibly have only 2 seconds before they switch on. Right? That's kind of the user behavior right now, right? The average time that we're spending on every piece, every screen, every reel, I mean, is not more than 2 seconds. So your ability to storytell in that short a period of time will definitely be different versus B2B, where, the nuance in terms of how really deeply can you understand the need of somebody that's going to make that buying decision would be a big differentiator, right? So from grabbing attention to really sort of going deeper and retaining attention would be one big piece. Because in the context of B2C versus B2B, it would really be around how well is your feature differentiated, right? And currently, of course, there are a lot of needs out there that are underserviced. So from a B2B context, it is about depth. And in a B2C context, it would really be around breadth, right? So that's kind of like where the share of wallet might be different. So your ability to tell that story would be very different, right? And of course, even in the context of the stakeholders that are coming in or the folks that you're speaking with, that again would be very different in terms of, how are you engaging? So I would say B2B would be one of those underpenetrated spaces where there is a lot more room to kind of try out different things and fail perhaps. B2C, if you're somebody who really likes being on that fast life, the fast motion, and of course, having way more creative liberty, B2C would be the place for you.
Great. Give me 3 tips you would give to someone who's looking to break into the PMM world.
We can differentiate that in terms of, let's say, someone fresh out of college versus someone who might probably be experienced.
Yes.
For a fresher, really expose yourself to as many different organizations that you can from an outsider perspective and start taking on, if at all there are any projects that are out there. I mean, there are different platforms that are there, be it a Fiverr where you can go ahead and be a freelancer, or even a lot of, let's say, hackathons of different kinds. Now we've got marketing hackathons that have come in as well. Also, like one of the spaces which is very low risk could just be, can you put out content which would be your point of view on a problem that you see an organization face? So what that really means is exercising that muscle to think about businesses and how you might come up with an innovative way of solving for them would be something that sets you apart and also sort of builds that muscle further in terms of your ability to see if this is a good fit, right? So from a pure fresher perspective, breaking into product marketing, really sort of think about that. Also, I know sometimes it can be hard, but maybe trying this way out, which is reaching out to folks that are already working in the company that you would love to work at or be associated at. But instead of reaching out with like a, hey, can I get 5 minutes on your calendar? Really sort of be like, what would this person care about? And if I can take that little bit of time to craft an outreach that would be interesting to them. So again, taking that example, if you want to connect with someone at Airbnb, think of a way that, a problem that they are trying to solve for. And if you could come up with a solution and open up that dialogue, it would really sort of set you apart in getting that first conversation in. For someone who's more experienced, like myself or you, who's kind of come in with a wealth of experience previously, it would be a little more introspective around what are some of your transferable skills, right? So taking a stock on skills. What is it that you see would really set you apart? It could be domain expertise. It could be previous projects. It could be your ability to take ownership. It could be a lot of different things in different contexts. So taking stock of skills and then seeing where the gaps are and how can you develop that either through your existing job, taking on stretch projects, or working with different folks. And the last one that stays consistent really is networking. Getting into some discipline and rhythm of networking. I know we all think of it as one of those good to do things, but in the current world, the power will be in relationships.
What's your one tip for networking without it being painful?
Calendarizing.
Okay, so do you do that?
Yes.
So we call
Yes. Calendarizing, put it on the calendar for it to not drop off your mind, because like I said, for a lot of us, it's an afterthought. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, I'm only going to talk to X person or Y person, right? Really sort of look at what is my objective? What am I trying to learn? If it's simply exposing myself to different folks from different walks of life or different industries, keep that in and then be open to new connections, right? It could a lot of times be someone's reached out to you.
Yeah.
Right. And we always kind of question of like, hey, do I want to spend this time? What's in it for me? But really tying it back to what's your objective of networking, which should in some cases be broad enough, and then calendarizing. So consistency is going to be that one tip. Discipline of just calendarizing.
Ikroop, this has been absolutely fantastic. I think I'm going to calendarize my next meetup soon. But thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was wonderful having you, and thank you for taking out time.
Thanks so much, Deeksha. I hope this has been useful.